Maybe what's been suffocating you isn't the world. It's the weight of caring too much about it, about what people think, what they expect, who you're supposed to be. But what if everything started falling into place the moment you stopped trying so hard? Michel de Montaigne figured this out centuries ago, and the truth he uncovered still shakes people, because it goes against everything you were taught to believe. This video won't hand you formulas. It'll show you what happens when you let go of everything you were never meant to carry in the first place. When you stop caring, everything starts to work, but not in the way you think. Some prisons don't need bars to keep you trapped. All they need is a voice, sometimes your own, whispering that you should smile more, speak less, follow the script. From an early age, most of us are conditioned to chase approval like it's oxygen. We edit who we are to fit into places we don't belong. We smile when we want to scream. We suppress our truth just to be accepted by people who, more often than not, don't even know who they are. Michel de Montaigne didn't see this urge to fit in as a moral weakness, but as a symptom of fear, the fear of being truly seen, or worse, misunderstood. But here's the paradox. The more you try to fit in, the more invisible you become. Writing in a time plagued by war, disease, and religious fanaticism, Montaigne chose to step away from public life, not out of cowardice, but out of clarity. In his tower, surrounded by books and silence, he began to see just how many people live not for themselves, but for an audience that never claps loud enough. His essays weren't dogmatic declarations, they were mirrors. In them, he exposed the quiet tragedy of living a life built on borrowed expectations. The greatest thing in the world, he wrote, is to know how to belong to oneself. We carry invisible rules passed down from family, school, society. Be polite, be productive, be likable. But almost no one teaches us how to be free. For Montaigne, freedom wasn't rebellion, it was inner ownership. It wasn't about doing whatever you want, but asking honestly, do I even want this? That inner revolution, the act of looking at your own life and daring to rewrite the script, is the first step out of the cage. Not every prison has walls, and not every escape makes noise. Some begin with a quiet refusal to keep pretending. We live as if life were some kind of math equation. If we do everything right, plan every step, eliminate all the mistakes, then we'll be safe. But Michel de Montaigne, after nearly dying in a horseback accident, realized a truth most people avoid facing. Control, for the most part, is an illusion. Nothing in this world is as fragile as the feeling of complete safety. We try to control what people think of us, what might happen tomorrow, even how we'll be remembered. And in this endless effort, what gets lost is life itself, the one that only exists in the present moment. Montaigne wrote, "My life has been full of terrible misfortunes, most of which never happened." That line, both ironic and heartbreaking, hits a painfully modern nerve, the weight of anxiety created by things that only exist in our imagination. How many sleepless nights over problems that never happened? How many conversations rehearsed in your mind that never saw the light of day? Behavioral neuroscience calls this the negativity bias, a survival mechanism wired into us that exaggerates danger to keep us alert. But instead of protecting us, it locks us in a constant state of tension. And an anxious mind, as Montaigne suggested, stops living reality just to manage imaginary ghosts. The real danger of the control myth is that it steals your presence. When you try to predict every step, you disconnect from the now, the only place where life actually unfolds. Montaigne wasn't advocating carelessness, but trust. He saw accepting the unexpected not as weakness, but as wisdom. In a world obsessed with over-planning, he invites us into a different kind of courage, the courage to stay open to the unpredictable, not because everything will go right, but because even when it doesn't, you can still find a way to bloom. There's a kind of violence that doesn't leave bruises, but slowly eats away at you in silence. The need to be accepted at any cost. It doesn't scream, it whispers, flatters, hides inside small, seemingly kind gestures born from fear. Michel de Montaigne saw this emotional trap with sharp clarity. He observed that the attempt to please, no matter how polite or gentle it looks, is often a quiet betrayal of the self. You don't notice it at first, but little by little, you start editing your voice, your clothes, your silences. Everything gets filtered through one invisible editor, someone else's gaze. That gaze, Montaigne believed, is far too unstable to be trusted. Living to please others, he said, is like chasing a shadow. No matter how hard you run, it's never solid enough to hold you. Modern psychology backs this up. The term social self-erasure describes when people silence their own desires just to avoid conflict or rejection. And the cruelest part? Even when approval finally comes, it feels empty. Because it wasn't really you they accepted. It was the version you crafted to fit in. Montaigne's answer isn't arrogance, it's wholeness. He invites us to know ourselves so deeply that the urge to be liked starts to fade on its own. When the roots of your self-worth are grounded inside you, other people's opinions lose their power to shape or hurt you. That's where true respect is born, not the kind you beg for, but the kind that radiates from someone who no longer needs to prove anything. Letting go of the need to be liked isn't coldness, it's the first glimpse of freedom. To a lot of people, letting go sounds cold, like giving up, like walking away means weakness. But to Michel de Montaigne, letting go wasn't about denying life. It was about embracing it with sharper vision. He saw unhealthy attachment as a kind of blindness. When you cling too tightly to an idea, a person, or an image of yourself, anything real or new feels like a threat. And in that rigidity, you break. True strength, Montaigne believed, lies in knowing what's worth holding on to and what you need to release. Behavioral psychology backs this up. Studies on cognitive flexibility, including research from Harvard Medical School, show that people who are more open to change tend to handle stress better, are more creative, and build emotional resilience more naturally. It makes sense. The ones who learn to let go of what weighs them down are the ones who move through life lighter. And lightness doesn't mean shallowness. It means emotional maturity. Letting go isn't isolation. It's choosing where your energy goes. It's not being numb, it's being selective. Montaigne understood that the heaviness we carry is often an unconscious choice. The real power of detachment is this: not letting anything or anyone define the center of your peace. When your well-being no longer depends on the permanence of things, you become freer, fuller, and more real. Montaigne wasn't inviting us to abandon life. He was pointing toward clarity. He taught that life is like holding a handful of sand. The tighter you grip, the more it slips through your fingers. But when you learn to open your hand, something beautiful happens. What truly matters stays. There's a subtle moment when effort turns into resistance. You start with genuine intention, but slowly it tightens into tension. You want to control every detail, every reaction, every outcome. You want to convince, impress, win. And the more you try, the further you drift from what you're actually chasing. Michel de Montaigne understood this well. He spoke about the creative emptiness that emerges when we stop compulsively pushing, when we replace effort with presence. Because some things can't be forced into place. They can only unfold when there's space. Neuroscience offers a powerful explanation. In studies on flow states, like those led by psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, researchers found that the human mind performs at its best, not under extreme pressure, but in a balance between challenge and surrender. Montaigne, though centuries ahead of the term, grasped this instinctively. In his writing, he showed that when you stop needing to prove, to push, to impress, truth starts rising naturally. He said he didn't write to be recognized, but out of curiosity. And it's in that state, without pressure, that the soul begins to bloom. How many times in your life did something finally work out the moment you stopped trying so hard? When you stopped begging for attention, love, recognition, and just showed up as you were? There's a quiet magnetism in those who don't force, a natural harmony that doesn't need to shout to be seen. Montaigne teaches us that the universe doesn't respond to desperation, it responds to alignment. And alignment isn't rigidity. It's when what you think, feel, and do are finally in sync. The less you need to prove, the more real you become. And the real, most of the time, is enough. Michel de Montaigne wasn't a martyr, a monk, or a tragic hero. He was, above all else, human. And it was exactly that raw, messy, contradictory humanity that made his philosophy so revolutionary. Instead of hiding his flaws, he turned them into material for thought. He openly admitted his fears, his vanity, his contradictions, and he did it without shame. Because for him, real wisdom didn't come from perfection. It came from being intimately familiar with instability. He once wrote, "I do not portray the whole man. I portray him as he is at this moment," a line that instantly destroys any fantasy of constant consistency. Modern psychology calls this radical self-acceptance, the ability to recognize your flaws without feeling the constant pressure to fix them. Research by Kristen Neff, a global leader in self-compassion, shows that people who accept themselves honestly are more resilient, less prone to depression, and actually more capable of change, precisely because they're not paralyzed by guilt or perfectionism. Montaigne sensed this truth back in the 16th century. Real transformation doesn't come from self-violence. It comes from reconciliation. In a world where everyone seems to be competing to have the most aligned life, Montaigne shows up like an antidote. He reminds us that changing your mind isn't weakness. It's proof that something is alive inside you. That contradicting yourself isn't failure, it's movement. And that showing your flaws doesn't make you less worthy. It makes you more real. The wisdom that comes from imperfection isn't lesser, it's deeper. Because it pulls you closer to your essence. Not the person you wish you were, but the person you actually are right now. And that, paradoxically, is the only real place to begin. Few pains are as silent as the feeling of being trapped in a relationship. Not out of love, but out of fear of rejection, of loneliness, of not being enough. In his deep reflections on human relationships, Montaigne noticed that most suffering in our bonds doesn't come from our differences, but from the desperate attempt to reshape others into our image. We try to fix the other person, predict their reactions, control their moves, as if love depended on obedience. But what grows from control isn't connection, it's dependence. In his essays, Montaigne wrote about his friendship with Etienne de la Boetie, a bond so free it didn't demand, didn't suffocate, didn't try to own. It was presence without possession, giving without domination. Modern psychology recognizes this kind of connection as a secure relationship, one where autonomy and individuality can exist without love being lost. Research by John Bowlby, founder of attachment theory, shows that the healthiest relationships aren't the ones that eliminate risk, but the ones that sustain the freedom to be. Montaigne understood this centuries ago. The more you try to hold on to someone, the more they slip away. The more you allow them to be who they are, the more they choose to stay. And that changes everything, because it reveals that the true meeting of two souls doesn't happen through force, but through lightness, not through pressure, but mutual choice. And it's exactly that freedom that gives depth. Montaigne didn't teach us to walk away from relationships. He taught us to change how we show up in them, to love without erasing yourself, to walk alongside someone without losing your own direction, to build bonds without breaking your shape. Because love that grows in the soil of freedom doesn't suffocate, it breathes, and it breathes with truth. If there's one thing Montaigne taught us, it's that a lighter life doesn't come from what we achieve, but from what we're brave enough to let go of. When you stop chasing approval, stop trying to control the uncontrollable, stop forcing connections, stop hiding your imperfections, that's when real life begins. You don't need to become someone else. You just need to stop abandoning who you already are. His philosophy wasn't a manual on how to live. It was a quiet invitation to look inward and ask yourself honestly, what am I still holding on to that no longer serves me? And now, I ask you, is there something in your life right now that's only hurting you because you keep insisting on holding it? Drop it in the comments. Your story might be exactly what someone else needed to hear today. If this message hit home for you, leave a like. It helps this video reach more people who are also ready to let go of what's been weighing them down. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to keep receiving content like this. because here, we don't sell ready-made answers. We light the kinds of questions that can change everything. See you in the next video.